It would be such a waste if I had spent all these years caring for everyone else and never learned how to care for myself. So today, this video is one that so many of you have asked me to make, and it's about the hidden cost of caring too much. What happens when you give and give and give until there's nothing left of you? Hello and welcome. It's so wonderful to see you again. I hope you've all been doing well. I have to tell you, I've been thinking about this topic for weeks now because I keep getting messages from so many of you saying that you feel drained, that you feel like you're disappearing, that you've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else, and now you don't even know who you are anymore. And I understand that. I truly, truly do, because I have lived that life. And I want to talk to you today about something that nobody really talks about, which is what it costs us when we care too much, when we give too much, when we lose ourselves in the process of loving and caring for others. Now, before I get started, I want to say that the delivery people just left. They brought some things, and you know how it is. Everything happens at once. But I'm here, and I'm going to talk to you about this because it matters so much. And I think especially for women, especially for those of us who were raised to believe that our worth comes from how much we sacrifice for others, this is something we need to understand. The first thing I want to talk about is recognizing when caring becomes self-abandonment. There's a difference between caring for someone and abandoning yourself in the process. And I didn't understand this for so many years of my life. I thought that being a good mother, a good wife, a good daughter meant that I always put myself last, that my needs didn't matter as much as everyone else's needs. And I can tell you from experience that is not true. That is a lie that we have been told and that we tell ourselves. When you are constantly putting everyone else first, when you are constantly ignoring your own needs, your own feelings, your own exhaustion, you are not being noble. You are slowly erasing yourself. And I know this because I did it. I did it for years and years. And I looked in the mirror one day and I didn't recognize the person looking back at me because I had spent so long being what everyone else needed me to be that I had forgotten who I actually was. And that is a very, very lonely and scary place to be. So how do you know when you've crossed that line from healthy caring to self-abandonment? Well, I'll tell you some of the signs that I've learned. You feel resentful all the time, even though you're doing things that you think you should want to do. You feel exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually exhausted, like there's nothing left inside of you. You feel like you can't say no, even when you desperately want to, because you're afraid of disappointing people or being seen as selfish. You feel invisible, like your feelings and your needs don't matter to anyone, including yourself. And you've lost touch with what you actually want, because you've spent so long only thinking about what everyone else wants. If any of that resonates with you, and I suspect it does for many of you watching this, then you need to understand that you have been caring too much at your own expense, and that has a cost, a real cost, that we're going to talk about. The physical cost of caring too much. This is something that people don't talk about enough. But when you are constantly in that state of self-sacrifice, when you are constantly stressed about taking care of everyone else, your body pays the price. I know for me, I developed all kinds of physical ailments that I now realize were directly connected to the stress of caring too much. I had headaches all the time. I had digestive problems. I was always getting sick because my immune system was run down from the constant stress. And you know what? The research bears this out. When you are chronically stressed, when you are constantly in that state of hypervigilance, taking care of everyone else and neglecting yourself, your body releases cortisol and other stress hormones constantly. And over time, that damages your body. It weakens your immune system. It can lead to heart problems, digestive issues, chronic pain, inflammation. all of these things. And I see so many women, especially older women, who have spent their whole lives caring for others, and their bodies are just breaking down, and they don't understand why. But the why is because they never took care of themselves. They gave and gave and gave until their bodies just couldn't take it anymore. So if you are someone who is constantly exhausted, who has mysterious aches and pains, who gets sick all the time, I want you to ask yourself, am I taking care of my body, or am I sacrificing my health for everyone else? Because your health matters. Your physical well-being matters, and you cannot pour from an empty cup. You just can't. The emotional cost, now this is where it gets really, really hard, because the emotional cost of caring too much is that you lose yourself, you lose your identity, you lose your sense of who you are separate from all the roles you play. And I'm going to tell you something that took me decades to learn. You are not just a mother. You are not just a wife. You are not just a daughter or a caregiver. You are a whole, complete person with your own dreams and desires and feelings and needs. And when you spend your whole life suppressing those things, when you spend your whole life pretending that your feelings don't matter, you create this emptiness inside of you. I remember when my children were grown and Arthur was still working, and I finally had some time to myself. I didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't know who I was without someone needing me, and that was terrifying, absolutely terrifying, because I had spent so long defining myself by how well I took care of others that when I didn't have that, I felt worthless. And that is the emotional cost that nobody warns you about when you care too much. You start to believe that your worth is conditional, that you only matter if you're useful to someone else. And that is such a painful way to live, because then you're constantly seeking validation from others. You're constantly trying to prove your worth by doing more and more and more. And it's never enough. It's never enough, because the validation has to come from inside of you. It has to come from you believing that you matter just because you exist, not because of what you do for other people. And then there's the resentment. Oh, the resentment that builds up when you're caring too much. You tell yourself that you're doing it out of love, and maybe you are, but when you're doing it at the expense of your own well-being, resentment builds and builds and builds, and then you feel guilty about the resentment because you think you shouldn't feel that way. You think you should just be happy to help. And it becomes this vicious cycle of giving and resenting and feeling guilty and giving more to try to make up for the resentment. And it just goes on and on and on. The relationship cost. Here's something else that people don't talk about enough. When you care too much, you actually damage your relationships because you're not being authentic, you're not being honest about your limits, about your needs, about your feelings, and relationships cannot thrive without honesty. They just can't. I know in my own life, when I was constantly saying yes when I meant no, when I was constantly taking care of everyone else and ignoring my own needs, I thought I was making my relationships better. I thought I was being loving. But what I was actually doing was creating resentment and distance. Because when you're not honest about your limits, people don't know where the boundaries are. And they keep asking for more and more. And then you resent them for asking, but they don't even know that you're at your limit, because you keep saying yes and you keep smiling and you keep pretending everything is fine. And then one day you explode or you withdraw or you just can't do it anymore. And everyone is confused because they had no idea that you were struggling because you never told them. And here's another thing. When you care too much, you attract people who will take advantage of that. I hate to say it, but it's true. When you have no boundaries, when you constantly put everyone else first, you attract takers. You attract people who will keep taking and taking and taking because you keep giving, and you never say no. And before you know it, you're surrounded by people who expect you to sacrifice yourself for them and who get upset when you finally try to set a boundary. Healthy relationships require boundaries. They require honesty. They require two people who both care about each other's well-being, not one person sacrificing everything for the other person. And I wish someone had told me that when I was younger. I wish someone had told me that it's okay to say no, that it's okay to have limits, that healthy people will respect those limits. And people who get upset when you set boundaries are showing you who they really are. The cost to your dreams and your purpose. You know what happens when you spend your whole life caring for everyone else? You forget that you have dreams of your own. You forget that you have a purpose beyond taking care of other people. And I'm telling you this as someone who lived it. I had dreams when I was young. I wanted to do things. I wanted to create things. I wanted to have a life that was mine. And then I got married and I had children, and I became what I thought I was supposed to be, which was someone who lived for everyone else. And don't get me wrong, I loved being a mother. I loved my children. I love them still with all my heart. But I lost myself in that role. I forgot that I was also a person with my own interests and passions and dreams. And it wasn't until much later in life that I started to reclaim those parts of myself. And I'm one of the lucky ones because I did eventually reclaim them. But I know so many women who never do, who go to their graves never having pursued their own dreams because they were too busy taking care of everyone else. And that is a tragedy. That is a real tragedy because we all have gifts. We all have something unique to offer the world. And when we suppress that, when we ignore that, because we think our only purpose is to serve others, we rob the world of our gifts, and we rob ourselves of the joy and fulfillment that comes from living authentically, from pursuing the things that light us up inside. So I want you to ask yourself, what dreams have you put aside? What parts of yourself have you suppressed because you think you don't have time? Or you think it's selfish? Or you think other people's needs are more important? And I want you to know that it is never too late to reclaim those parts of yourself, to pursue those dreams, even in small ways, even if it's just spending an hour a week on something that's just for you, that brings you joy, that reminds you that you are more than just what you do for other people. Learning to set boundaries. Now, this is the part where I'm going to give you some practical advice because I know that you might be listening to all of this and thinking, okay, I understand the problem, but what do I do about it? And the answer is boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. I know that's become such a buzzword these days, but it's true. You have to learn to set boundaries. And that starts with understanding that no is a complete sentence. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to justify yourself. You don't have to have a good enough reason when you say no. You can just say, no, I can't do that. No, that doesn't work for me. No, I need to take care of myself right now. And I know that feels impossible. I know that feels terrifying, especially if you've spent your whole life saying yes. But I'm telling you, it is essential, absolutely essential, if you want to stop caring too much and start caring for yourself. Start small. You don't have to set huge boundaries right away. Start by saying no to one small thing. Notice how it feels. Notice that the world doesn't end. Notice that people might be disappointed, but they survive and you survive. And gradually, you can build up to bigger boundaries. You can build up to protecting your time and your energy and your emotional well-being in bigger ways. And here's something important. Boundaries are not mean. Boundaries are not selfish. Boundaries are loving, because when you have boundaries, you can show up authentically in your relationships. You can give from a place of genuine desire to give rather than from obligation or fear. And that is so much more valuable than the resentful giving that happens when you have no boundaries. Understanding that self-care is not selfish. I have said this so many times on my channel, but I'm going to say it again because it's so important. Self-care is not selfish. Self-care is essential. You cannot take care of anyone else if you are running on empty. You just can't. And I know we've been taught, especially those of us who are older, especially women, that taking care of ourselves is selfish, that we should always put others first. But that is not sustainable, and it's not healthy. Self-care doesn't have to be elaborate. It doesn't have to be expensive. It can be as simple as taking 10 minutes to sit quietly with a cup of tea. It can be going for a walk by yourself. It can be saying no to one thing so that you have time to rest. It can be asking for help when you need it. All of these things are self-care, and they are necessary, absolutely necessary. And you know what? When you take care of yourself, you're actually better able to care for others because you're not running on empty. You're not resentful. You're not exhausted. You're giving from a full cup, and that benefits everyone, including the people you care about. Recognizing people-pleasing patterns. This is a big one, and it ties into everything we've been talking about. Many of us who care too much are actually people pleasers. We have learned that our worth comes from making other people happy, from being what other people need us to be. And that is exhausting, and it's not sustainable, and it's based on a lie. The lie is that if we just do enough, if we just make everyone happy, if we just sacrifice enough, then we will be loved, then we will be valued, then we will be worthy. But the truth is, you are already worthy. You are already valuable. You don't have to earn love through self-sacrifice. You don't have to prove your worth by making everyone else happy. And I know that's hard to hear, especially if you've spent your whole life believing the opposite. But I'm telling you from experience, people-pleasing doesn't work. You cannot make everyone happy. You cannot control what other people think of you by sacrificing yourself. And even if you could, is that the kind of love you want? Do you want people to love you because you do things for them? Or do you want people to love you for who you actually are? Start paying attention to when you're people-pleasing. Notice when you say yes, but you mean no. Notice when you're doing something out of obligation or fear rather than genuine desire. And start asking yourself, what would I do if I wasn't afraid of disappointing someone? What would I do if I believed that I was worthy just as I am? And then start making choices based on those answers, even if it's scary, even if it feels uncomfortable. The gift of caring for yourself. Here's what I want you to understand. Everything I've been talking about the cost of caring too much, it might sound depressing, it might sound heavy, but there is hope. There is another way, and the other way is learning to care for yourself with the same tenderness and devotion that you've been giving to everyone else. Imagine what your life would look like if you cared for yourself the way you care for the people you love. Imagine if you spoke to yourself the way you speak to a dear friend. Imagine if you prioritized your own well-being the way you prioritize everyone else's. That would be revolutionary, absolutely revolutionary. And you know what? When you start doing that, when you start caring for yourself, something beautiful happens. You start to come back to yourself. You start to remember who you are. You start to reclaim your energy, your joy, your sense of purpose. You start to show up in your relationships more authentically. And the people who truly love you, they will support that. They will celebrate that because they want you to be happy. They want you to be whole. And the people who don't support it, the people who get upset when you start setting boundaries and caring for yourself, those people are showing you that they valued what you did for them more than who you actually are. And as painful as that is, it's important information, and it gives you the opportunity to decide whether those relationships are really serving you. Making the shift, I know that everything I've talked about might feel overwhelming. You might be thinking, I don't even know where to start. I've been this way my whole life. How do I change now? And I want you to know that it is possible. I changed. I've seen countless other people change. You can change too, and it starts with awareness. It starts with recognizing the patterns we've talked about, recognizing when you're caring too much, when you're abandoning yourself, when you're people-pleasing. And then it's about making small shifts, starting to set small boundaries, practicing saying no, practicing self-care, being honest about your feelings and your needs. And it won't be perfect. You will slip back into old patterns. I still do sometimes, but that's okay. Progress is not perfection. Progress is just taking one small step and then another small step. And over time, those small steps add up to a completely different life. Surround yourself with support. Find people who understand, who have been through this themselves, who can encourage you when it's hard. Talk to a therapist if you can. Join a support group. Read books. Watch videos like this one that remind you that you are worthy, that your needs matter, that caring for yourself is not selfish. Forgiving yourself, here's something else that's really important as you start to recognize how much you've been caring too much. As you start to see the cost of it, you might feel angry at yourself. You might think, how could I have done this for so long? How could I have let myself disappear like this? And I want you to be gentle with yourself. I want you to practice self-compassion. You did the best you could with what you knew. You were doing what you were taught to do. You were trying to be good and loving and worthy, and there is nothing wrong with that. The problem was never that you cared. The problem was that you cared at the expense of yourself. And now you know better. Now you have the opportunity to do things differently. So forgive yourself for all the times you said yes when you meant no. Forgive yourself for all the times you ignored your own needs. Forgive yourself for losing yourself. You were doing the best you could, and now you get to do something different. Now you get to choose yourself. The invitation. So here's what I want to leave you with today. Caring for others is beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful things about being human. But caring for others at the expense of yourself, that comes at a cost. A cost to your health, your emotional well-being, your relationships, your dreams, your very sense of self. And you don't have to pay that cost anymore. You really don't. You can learn to care for others and care for yourself. You can learn to set boundaries. You can learn to say no. You can learn to prioritize your own well-being. And when you do that, you don't become selfish. You become healthier. You become more authentic. You become more whole. And that benefits everyone, including the people you love. So I'm inviting you today to start caring for yourself, to start setting boundaries, to start saying no when you need to start prioritizing your own well-being, to start remembering that you are worthy just as you are, not because of what you do for other people, but because you exist, because you are a beautiful, unique human being with gifts to offer the world. And I know it's scary. I know it feels impossible. But I promise you, it is worth it. You are worth it. Your well-being matters. Your needs matter. Your dreams matter. You matter. And the sooner you start believing that and living like that, the sooner you can start experiencing the joy and the peace and the fulfillment that comes from living authentically, from caring for yourself as much as you care for everyone else. So please do something wonderful for yourself today. Something that reminds you that you matter. Something that fills your cup instead of emptying it. And as always, share the love, but make sure you're including yourself in that love. Give yourself some of that tenderness, some of that care, some of that devotion that you've been giving to everyone else. And let's all pray for world peace. And remember that you are never alone and you are always, always loved. Take care, and I hope to see you in my next video. Be blessed.